Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're having a great day today. So today I want to talk about the Sony 10 to 18 millimeter f4 lens. So this is my go-to lens when I shoot real estate, and I think shooting real estate, like I've talked about in other videos, is a great way to make a little extra money, helps pay for equipment, helps pay the bills, all that kind of good stuff. I want to talk about this lens in particular. This is my go-to, and some of the drawbacks and some of the pros for this lens, and what maybe something you might want to consider. So let's start with some of the pros. So one of the pros with this lens particularly is the fact that it's not a fisheye. So fisheye lenses will usually have a bulge in the glass that helps pick up more of the surrounding area so you get a wider field of view. This, even though it's a 15 millimeter equivalent on the widest end, it doesn't have that. So the nice thing about that is you can use any kind of filter that you want. So the same filters that I use on my 24 to 70 are the same I use on this, whether that be my polarizer, my ND, whatever it may be that you want to use. So I think that's a really good perk for this lens in particular. Some of those other ones, you're not going to be able to do that. They even, to the extent that they have to put an ND filter in the base of the lens as opposed to at the end, just because you can't put an actual ND filter over the top of it. So quite a bit of a drawback on those. So I think that's one perk with this lens. There are cheaper primes out there. So right now this is running for $548 on B&H and Amazon. I'll throw a link below. Click that, go check it out if you want to. There are cheaper versions out there. You can get, some 20 millimeters, some 15 millimeters and whatever, some pretty wide lenses. But the drawback to having a prime lens for shooting real estate is sometimes it can lead to making a room look distorted or bigger than it actually is. And I think one of my big things is I wanna make sure I shoot rooms and then that actually accurately portrays how big the room is and what it actually looks like. So the nice thing is when you have that 18 millimeter on the other side, which is actually like a 27 millimeter full frame equivalent, is you can actually capture what the room looks like because you can compress that a little bit on that, a little bit of a zoom. So it gives you a little bit more variety in those primes. So yeah, it may cost a couple $100 extra, but I think that extra little bit of flexibility that it gives you is definitely worth it. Let's talk about maybe some of the drawbacks to this lens. So it is a little bit cheaper and it is made for APS-C. It's not a full frame lens. So with that, a little bit cheaper, it doesn't have any of the weather sealing that you might see on some of the higher end lenses with Sony, either their G series or their G Master, or even some of the Sigma line lenses. If you're not shooting out in the weather, it's probably not a big deal. Most of the time when I'm shooting real estate, it's gotta be either nice outside to take good photos or I'm indoors, so it's not really that big of a problem. But maybe you consider that if you're thinking about using this lens for outdoor shoots, or you're doing landscape or something like that. Something just to think about. So one of the other things, it is an f4 lens, so you do have to bump up the ISO, particularly when you're inside. It's a little bit harder to shoot, especially if you're shooting at 60 frames per second, like most people are for real estate. That faster frame rate mixed with the f4, you definitely have to compensate with the ISO. So if your camera doesn't handle that very well, then that could be an issue. I shoot all my stuff on the a7 IV, and it handles high ISO pretty well, so that's usually not a problem for me. One of the things you are going to need to consider with this lens is the fact that it is a crop sensor. So if you're running a full frame camera, it's going to crop in on your sensor and you're going to lose megapixels when you're shooting. So not a problem for me. I'm using a7R4, so I have 61 megapixels to work with. It's not a problem. But if you're using something that doesn't have so many megapixels, you're gonna end up having issues. I still end up with 26, which is more than enough to deliver to a client. It's gonna have plenty of resolution. But if you're considering cropping and you're only running a 26 megapixel camera, you're gonna end up with something that's not very high resolution in the long run. So something to think about. In video mode, it's not an issue. A lot of the cameras, especially the Sonys, are gonna have that 1.5 crop on that, but it doesn't lower the resolution. You're still gonna be in 4K when you're shooting, so it's not gonna be an issue with that. And with a 10 millimeter, and by the time it crops in, it's still a 15 millimeter equivalent, which is plenty wide enough for everything that you're gonna be doing. So one of the other pros that I forgot to mention is that this is a pretty lightweight lens. It's pretty small, so when you're putting it on a gimbal, it's not too hard to balance. That is one of the perks. And if you're shooting real estate, you're probably gonna be using a gimbal to be walking through houses and stuff like that. So just that's not a bad thing to have a smaller lens like that. So again, I think overall it's a good lens. It does have a couple drawbacks, but I think for the price, especially right now with it being on sale for that $548, I think it's a pretty screaming deal and a pretty easy way to get into shooting real estate if it's something you're not doing and maybe you're interested in, or if you're looking for a more budget-friendly lens to shoot wide, this is a really good option. So hey, if you like this video and you want to see more content like this, go ahead and make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. I'd appreciate that. It definitely helps me out with YouTube. And yeah, if you have anything else that you want to look at, I've got a ton of reviews that I want to do, but if you have something in particular, throw it in the comments below. Or if you've had experience with this lens, yeah, throw your comments below and tell me what you think about it. Yeah, I hope you guys have a good day, and we'll see you on the next one.